Question 1. Regulatory review indicates that maintaining consistent sugar syrup quality is essential for several key pastry products. When preparing a large batch of simple syrup intended for a delicate confection, a pastry chef observes that small sugar crystals are beginning to form on the inner walls of the saucepan. Which of the following actions best adheres to best practices for preventing crystallization and ensuring product integrity? Option A. Immediately remove the saucepan from the heat and stir vigorously to break up any forming crystals. Option B. Gently brush down the sides of the saucepan with a wet pastry brush to dissolve any forming crystals. Option C. Add a significant amount of additional water to the syrup to dilute the sugar concentration and prevent further crystallization. Option D. Continue boiling the syrup for the predetermined time, assuming the crystals will dissolve as the syrup cools. Correct answer is A. Immediately remove the saucepan from the heat and stir vigorously to break up any forming crystals. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in high-volume pastry production, where maintaining consistent quality across batches is paramount. The chef must balance the immediate need for product with the long-term implications of ingredient integrity and regulatory compliance. The risk of crystallization in sugar syrups, particularly when dealing with large quantities and varying ambient conditions, can lead to significant product defects, impacting both customer satisfaction and the establishment's reputation. Adhering to established food safety and quality guidelines is not merely a procedural step, but a fundamental ethical obligation to consumers. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach, which involves carefully monitoring the syrup's temperature and visual cues to identify the precise boiling stage and implementing preventative measures against crystallization, represents best professional practice. This aligns with the Certified Pastry Chef (CPC) examination's emphasis on practical application of culinary science and adherence to industry standards. Specifically, understanding the science behind sugar crystallization, e.g., the role of seed crystals, agitation, and impurities, and employing techniques like adding a small amount of acid or corn syrup to inhibit crystal formation are critical for producing stable, high-quality products. This proactive approach minimizes waste, ensures product consistency, and upholds the establishment's commitment to quality, which is implicitly governed by general food safety and quality assurance principles expected of a certified professional. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to rely solely on a preset timer without visual or temperature verification. This fails to account for variations in equipment, humidity, or ingredient composition, which can significantly alter the syrup's actual boiling stage. This disregard for real-time monitoring can lead to overboiling, hard crack stage when soft ball was intended, or underboiling, both resulting in product failure and potential waste. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of diligence and a failure to uphold the expected standard of care in food preparation. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the appearance of small sugar crystals forming on the sides of the pan, assuming they will dissolve or are insignificant. These seed crystals are the primary instigators of widespread crystallization throughout the syrup. Allowing them to persist directly contradicts best practices for preventing crystallization and will inevitably lead to a grainy or solid sugar mass, rendering the syrup unusable for its intended purpose. This represents a failure to apply fundamental knowledge of sugar science and a disregard for product quality. A third incorrect approach is to add a large, arbitrary amount of liquid to a syrup that has begun to crystallize, hoping to fix it. While diluting a syrup can lower its sugar concentration, adding excessive liquid to an already crystallized syrup is inefficient and can negatively impact the final product's texture and stability. It is a reactive measure that often fails to fully rectify the problem and can introduce new issues. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of the crystallization process and a poor problem-solving methodology, potentially leading to further product compromise. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach sugar syrup production with a systematic methodology that integrates scientific understanding with practical observation. This involves 1. Understanding the target boiling stage and its characteristics: temperature, visual appearance, texture. 2. Utilizing appropriate tools, thermometer, visual cues for accurate monitoring. 3. Implementing preventative measures against crystallization based on scientific principles. 4. Reacting to deviations with informed, targeted interventions rather than guesswork. This decision-making process ensures consistency, quality, and compliance with the implicit standards of professional culinary practice. Question 2. Process analysis reveals that a certified pastry chef, CPC, is tasked with producing a large batch of quick puff pastry for a high-volume catering event with a tight deadline. The chef is considering a simplified method that involves fewer folds and reduced chilling times to expedite the process. Which approach best aligns with the professional standards and ethical obligations of a CPC? Option A. Significantly reduce the number of folds to just 2 and skip chilling entirely to maximize speed, relying on the assumption that the heat of the oven will create sufficient steam. Option B. Substitute a portion of the butter with a solid vegetable shortening to achieve a more pliable dough that requires less chilling, accepting a potential compromise in flavor. Option C. Implement a simplified folding and chilling schedule that still aims to create distinct, albeit thinner, layers of butter and dough, ensuring adequate chilling between steps to prevent butter melting. Option D. Incorporate softened butter directly into the flour mixture to create a quick dough, marketing it as a speedy puff to manage customer expectations. The correct answer is C. Implement a simplified folding and chilling schedule that still aims to create distinct, albeit thinner, layers of butter and dough, ensuring adequate chilling between steps to prevent butter melting. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because the certified pastry chef, CPC, must balance efficiency with the fundamental principles of pastry technique. A simplified method for quick puff pastry risks compromising the essential layering that defines its characteristic texture and rise. The chef must make a judgment call on whether the time-saving benefits outweigh the potential degradation of quality, which directly impacts customer satisfaction and the reputation of the establishment. Adherence to established CPC standards for quality and technique is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes maintaining the integrity of the layering process, even within a simplified method. This involves understanding the core mechanics of puff pastry, the creation of distinct, thin layers of dough and butter that separate during baking due to steam. A simplified method that still achieves adequate, albeit perhaps not textbook perfect, layering through careful folding and chilling demonstrates best professional practice. This approach ensures that the final product meets the expected quality standards of a certified pastry chef, upholding the reputation and integrity of the CPC designation. It reflects a deep understanding of the science behind the pastry, allowing for adaptation without sacrificing essential outcomes. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves significantly reducing the number of folds or the chilling time between folds. This directly violates the principles of puff pastry creation. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold the standards expected of a CPC, potentially misleading customers about the quality of the product. This approach risks creating a pastry that is dense, greasy, or lacks the characteristic flaky texture, thereby failing to deliver on the product promise. Another incorrect approach might be to substitute ingredients or alter the butter-to-dough ratio without understanding the impact on steam generation and layer separation. This is a regulatory failure in terms of adhering to established best practices and ingredient integrity as understood within the CPC framework. Such a deviation could lead to a product that does not perform as expected, impacting both texture and flavor, and potentially violating food safety or quality guidelines if the substitutions are not properly vetted. A third incorrect approach could be to rely on a trick or shortcut that bypasses the fundamental concept of creating distinct butter layers, such as incorporating softened butter directly into the dough. This is a fundamental ethical and regulatory failure for a CPC. It misrepresents the product as puff pastry when it is, in fact, a different type of dough altogether. This undermines the credibility of the CPC and the establishment, as it fails to deliver the promised product characteristics and violates the spirit of the certification. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the core principles of the technique, layering and puff pastry. They should then assess potential shortcuts or simplified methods against these core principles. The framework involves asking, does this simplification fundamentally compromise the essential outcome, flakiness, rise? If the answer is yes, the simplification should be rejected or modified. The next step is to consider the impact on quality, customer expectation, and professional reputation. Finally, professionals should always refer to the established guidelines and best practices associated with their certification, CPC, to ensure compliance and uphold ethical standards. Question 3. The assessment process reveals a directive from management to reduce the portion size of a signature dessert by approximately 10% to improve profitability, without providing any updated scaling guidelines or requiring retesting of the recipe. As a certified pastry chef, CPC, what is the most professionally responsible course of action? Option A. Implement the 10% portion reduction as directed, using smaller serving utensils to visually compensate for the change, without further testing or documentation. Option B. Arbitrarily reduce the amount of key ingredients in the recipe by approximately 10% to achieve the desired portion size reduction, without retesting the recipe's structural integrity or final yield. Option C. Immediately implement the 10% portion reduction by simply scooping or plating less of the dessert, accepting the potential for inconsistency and reduced quality to meet the immediate directive. Option D. Adhere to the established recipe and scaling guidelines, ensuring consistent portioning and quality, and communicate the importance of recipe integrity and accurate yield calculations for maintaining product standards and customer satisfaction. The correct answer is D. Adhere to the established recipe and scaling guidelines, ensuring consistent portioning and quality, and communicate the importance of recipe integrity and accurate yield calculations for maintaining product standards and customer satisfaction. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves a conflict between maintaining established quality standards and responding to immediate cost pressures. The certified pastry chef, CPC, must balance the integrity of their recipes and the expected quality of the final product with the financial realities of a business. Accurate portioning and consistent scaling are fundamental to both quality and cost control, directly impacting customer satisfaction and profitability. The ethical dilemma arises when a directive suggests compromising these principles for perceived short-term gain. The correct approach prioritizes adherence to established, tested recipes and scaling methods. This upholds the integrity of the brand, ensures consistent product quality that customers expect, and maintains accurate costings. From a professional and ethical standpoint, this aligns with the CPC's responsibility to deliver a product that meets defined standards. It also prevents potential issues related to customer complaints, ingredient waste due to inconsistent results, and inaccurate financial reporting stemming from unverified recipe adjustments. This approach reflects a commitment to professionalism and long-term business sustainability. An incorrect approach that involves arbitrarily reducing portion sizes without retesting or recalculating yield is ethically flawed and professionally unsound. This directly violates the principle of consistency and accuracy in pastry production. It can lead to a decline in product quality, customer dissatisfaction, and damage to the establishment's reputation. Furthermore, it undermines the established costing and pricing structure, potentially leading to inaccurate profit margins and financial misrepresentation. This approach prioritizes short-term cost reduction over established quality and ethical business practices. Another incorrect approach might be to implement the suggested reduction without any documentation or communication. This demonstrates a lack of transparency and accountability. It bypasses the necessary steps of recipe validation and quality control, which are crucial for maintaining standards. Ethically, it is deceptive to customers who expect a certain product quality and portion size. Professionally, it shows a disregard for the systematic processes that ensure consistent and high-quality output. A third incorrect approach could be to implement the reduction and then attempt to hide the change by using slightly smaller serving utensils or presentation techniques. This is a form of deception. It fails to address the core issue of recipe integrity and accurate scaling. It is ethically problematic as it misleads customers and is professionally irresponsible as it avoids proper quality control and recipe management. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Understanding the directive and its implications for quality, cost, and customer experience. 2. Consulting established recipes and scaling guidelines to assess the impact of any proposed changes. 3. If a change is deemed necessary for cost control, proposing a scientifically validated adjustment, e.g., recalculating yield and portion size through testing, rather than an arbitrary reduction. 4. Communicating any proposed changes and their rationale to relevant stakeholders, e.g., management, kitchen team. 5. Prioritizing adherence to established quality standards and ethical business practices. Question 4. Implementation of a comprehensive food safety management system in a busy pastry kitchen requires a proactive approach to prevent hazards. Which of the following strategies best embodies a process optimization approach to hack principles: cross-contamination prevention, proper food handling, temperature control, storage guidelines, and personal hygiene? Option A. Prioritizing production speed by minimizing cleaning and sanitization steps between different tasks and allowing for flexible temperature monitoring based on perceived ingredient freshness. Option B. Relying on experienced staff's intuition to identify potential food safety issues and conducting informal visual checks of ingredients and workstations. Option C. Establishing documented procedures for monitoring critical control points, including temperature checks for ingredients and finished products, rigorous cleaning and sanitization schedules for all equipment, and mandatory staff training on personal hygiene and cross-contamination prevention. Option D. Implementing a system where utensils are washed only when visibly soiled, and personal hygiene practices are reinforced through occasional reminders rather than formal training. Correct answer is C. Establishing documented procedures for monitoring critical control points, including temperature checks for ingredients and finished products, rigorous cleaning and sanitization schedules for all equipment, and mandatory staff training on personal hygiene and cross-contamination prevention. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in a professional pastry kitchen, balancing efficiency with stringent food safety protocols. The pressure to produce high volumes of delicate pastries while maintaining absolute hygiene requires constant vigilance and well-defined procedures. The challenge lies in ensuring that every team member understands and consistently applies hack principles, particularly concerning cross-contamination, temperature control, and personal hygiene, without compromising the quality or speed of production. The correct approach prioritizes the systematic identification and control of potential hazards throughout the pastry production process. This involves a thorough understanding of hack principles, which are foundational to preventing foodborne illnesses. Specifically, it emphasizes proactive measures like establishing critical control points, CCP, for temperature-sensitive ingredients, implementing strict protocols for cleaning and sanitizing equipment to prevent cross-contamination between raw and ready-to-eat items, and ensuring rigorous personal hygiene standards for all staff. This approach is best professional practice because it directly aligns with regulatory requirements for food safety, such as those outlined by the Food Standards Agency, FSA, in the UK, and ethical obligations to protect consumer health. It demonstrates a commitment to a safe working environment and the production of safe food products. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on visual inspection, without implementing documented procedures for temperature monitoring, fails to address critical control points. This is a regulatory failure, as it bypasses established hack principles designed to prevent hazards like bacterial growth. Ethically, it places consumers at unnecessary risk. Another incorrect approach that allows for the reuse of utensils without proper sanitization between handling different ingredients, such as raw fruit and finished creams, represents a significant cross-contamination risk. This is a direct violation of food safety regulations and an ethical lapse, as it can lead to the transfer of pathogens. Finally, an approach that neglects regular hand washing and proper glove usage, especially after handling raw ingredients or touching surfaces, is a critical personal hygiene failure. This directly contravenes food safety legislation and demonstrates a disregard for preventing the spread of microorganisms, posing a serious health risk. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic, risk-based approach. Chefs must first identify potential hazards at each stage of production, establish critical control points, CCP, where these hazards can be controlled, set critical limits for each CCP, monitor these limits, establish corrective actions if limits are exceeded, and implement verification procedures to ensure the system is working. This framework, embedded within HACP, guides decisions towards proactive prevention rather than reactive problem solving, ensuring both safety and quality. Question 5. The evaluation methodology shows that a certified pastry chef, CPC, is developing a new signature dessert intended to be marketed as nut-free. During the development process, the chef uses a variety of nuts and seeds for other menu items, and the same commercial mixer is used for both nut-containing and nut-free preparations, with only a standard cleaning between uses. A customer with a severe nut allergy has inquired about the nut-free dessert, expressing concern about potential cross-contamination. What is the most ethically and regulatorily sound approach for the CPC? Option A. Inform the customer that while the dessert recipe does not contain nuts, the preparation environment may pose a risk of cross-contamination due to shared equipment, and explain the steps taken to minimize this risk, advising them to make a decision based on their comfort level. Option B. Assure the customer that the dessert is definitively nut-free, as the recipe does not include any nuts, and proceed with preparation using the standard cleaning protocol for the mixer. Option C. Use a completely separate, dedicated mixer for the nut-free dessert preparation to guarantee no cross-contamination, even if it means a slight delay in production. Option D. Decline to make the dessert for this customer, citing the potential for cross-contamination as an unmanageable risk, without offering further explanation or alternative solutions. The correct answer is A. Inform the customer that while the dessert recipe does not contain nuts, the preparation environment may pose a risk of cross-contamination due to shared equipment, and explain the steps taken to minimize this risk, advising them to make a decision based on their comfort level. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that a certified pastry chef, CPC, must navigate ethical dilemmas concerning ingredient sourcing and transparency, particularly when dealing with allergens. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits the chef's desire to create a signature product against the paramount duty to protect customer health and comply with food safety regulations. The chef must balance culinary innovation with the legal and ethical obligations to disclose potential allergens accurately. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes customer safety and regulatory compliance above all else. By proactively identifying the potential for cross-contamination with nuts, even in a nut-free product, and implementing strict segregation protocols, the chef demonstrates a commitment to allergen management. Furthermore, transparent communication with the customer about the potential for trace amounts of nuts due to shared equipment is crucial. This aligns with food safety guidelines that mandate clear allergen labeling and disclosure to prevent severe allergic reactions. The chef's responsibility extends beyond the ingredients themselves to the entire preparation process. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the assumption that the nut-free claim is absolute, without verifying the equipment's cleaning status or considering shared preparation areas, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This could lead to a severe allergic reaction in a customer, resulting in legal liability for the establishment and severe harm to the individual. It violates the fundamental principle of due diligence in food preparation and allergen control. Another incorrect approach, which is to dismiss the customer's concern about potential nut cross-contamination because the recipe itself does not contain nuts, is also ethically and regulatorily unsound. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of the complexities of allergen management in a commercial kitchen and a failure to uphold the duty of care owed to customers. It ignores the practical realities of food preparation, where cross-contamination is a constant risk. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a multi-step approach. 1. Thoroughly understand the customer's dietary restrictions and concerns. 2. Assess all ingredients for potential allergens, even those not explicitly listed in the recipe. 3. Evaluate the preparation environment for potential cross-contamination risks, including shared equipment, surfaces, and utensils. 4. Implement strict protocols to mitigate identified risks, such as dedicated equipment or rigorous cleaning procedures. 5. Communicate transparently with the customer about any residual risks, even after mitigation efforts. 6. Document all steps taken and communications made. This systematic approach ensures that customer safety and regulatory compliance are maintained, fostering trust and upholding professional integrity. Question 6. The monitoring system demonstrates that a significant portion of the current fruit inventory is approaching peak ripeness, with some items showing early signs of overripeness, while other seasonal fruits are still in their early stages of development. Considering the upcoming production schedule and the need to maintain optimal quality and minimize waste, which approach best optimizes the use of these fruits? Option A. Process all fruits that are currently ripe or overripe immediately into purees or compotes, regardless of their specific application in the upcoming menu, to prevent any further spoilage. Option B. Focus solely on the fruits that are in their early stages of development, as they represent the future of the inventory, and defer the use of the riper fruits until absolutely necessary. Option C. Continue with the standard production schedule, using fruits as they are called for in recipes, and address any spoilage issues as they arise without altering the current fruit management strategy. Option D. Prioritize using the fruits closest to overripeness first, preparing them for immediate use in desserts where their texture and sweetness are most pronounced, while implementing controlled chilling for fruits at peak ripeness to extend their usability for later applications. The correct answer is D. Prioritize using the fruits closest to overripeness first, preparing them for immediate use in desserts where their texture and sweetness are most pronounced, while implementing controlled chilling for fruits at peak ripeness to extend their usability for later applications. Explanation: the scenario presents a common challenge in a professional pastry kitchen, ensuring consistent quality and safety of ingredients, specifically fruits, while optimizing workflow. The monitoring system's data on fruit ripeness and storage conditions highlights the need for proactive management to prevent spoilage and maintain product integrity. This requires a pastry chef to apply knowledge of fruit characteristics, seasonality, and preservation techniques in a practical, operational context. The challenge lies in balancing immediate production needs with long-term quality and cost-effectiveness, all while adhering to food safety standards. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the use of fruit at its peak ripeness, which directly impacts flavor, texture, and visual appeal, critical elements in high-quality pastry. By actively managing the fruit inventory based on ripeness and seasonality, the chef minimizes waste, reduces the risk of using subpar ingredients, and ensures that seasonal flavors are showcased at their best. This aligns with the ethical responsibility to provide customers with the highest quality products and the professional obligation to manage resources efficiently. Furthermore, understanding and applying appropriate preservation methods, such as controlled chilling or specific preparation techniques, extends the usability of fruits without compromising their quality, thereby optimizing the overall process. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the oldest stock, regardless of ripeness, fails to uphold professional standards. This could lead to the use of overripe or underripe fruit, resulting in inconsistent product quality, potential spoilage, and increased waste if the fruit becomes unusable. Ethically, this is unacceptable as it compromises the integrity of the final product and customer satisfaction. Another incorrect approach that involves immediate processing of all available fruit, irrespective of ripeness or planned usage, demonstrates poor process optimization. This can lead to premature spoilage of fruit that is not immediately needed, or the use of fruit that is not at its optimal stage for specific applications, negatively impacting flavor and texture. This approach also fails to consider the cost implications of unnecessary processing and potential waste. A further incorrect approach that neglects the monitoring system's data and relies on ad hoc decisions about fruit usage ignores the benefits of data-driven management. This can result in a reactive rather than proactive approach to ingredient management, leading to missed opportunities for optimal fruit utilization and increased risk of spoilage. It signifies a lack of attention to detail and a failure to leverage available information for improved operational efficiency and product quality. Professional decision-making in such situations requires a systematic approach. This involves 1. Understanding the data provided by the monitoring system. 2. Assessing the current inventory of fruits, noting their ripeness and storage conditions. 3. Considering the planned menu and production schedule. 4. Applying knowledge of fruit seasonality and optimal ripeness for different pastry applications. 5. Evaluating appropriate preservation and preparation techniques to maximize usability and quality. 6. Making informed decisions that balance immediate needs with long-term quality, cost-effectiveness, and waste reduction, always prioritizing food safety and product excellence. Question 7. Governance review demonstrates a need to standardize pastry production protocols. A pastry chef is tasked with developing a new recipe for a delicate sponge cake, a product known for its light, airy, and tender crumb. The chef has access to several types of flour, all-purpose, bread, cake, and a standard gluten-free blend. Considering the desired outcome for the sponge cake, which flour type is the most appropriate choice to achieve the characteristic texture and why? Option A. Gluten-free flour blend to ensure the cake is suitable for a wider range of dietary needs. Option B. Bread flour because its high protein content will provide the necessary structure for a robust cake. Option C. Cake flour due to its low protein content and fine milling, which minimizes gluten development for a tender crumb. Option D. All-purpose flour, as it offers a balance of protein suitable for most cake applications. The correct answer is C. Cake flour, due to its low protein content and fine milling, which minimizes gluten development for a tender crumb. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in professional pastry kitchens, ensuring product consistency and quality when faced with variations in raw ingredients. The chef must make a critical decision regarding flour selection based on its inherent properties and the desired outcome for a specific pastry. This requires a deep understanding of flour types, their protein content, and how these factors influence gluten development, which directly impacts texture and structure. The challenge lies in translating theoretical knowledge into practical application to achieve a predictable and desirable result, adhering to established culinary standards and potentially client expectations. Correct approach analysis. Selecting cake flour for a delicate sponge cake is the best professional practice. Cake flour has a low protein content, typically 7–9%, and is finely milled. This results in minimal gluten development when mixed with liquid, leading to a tender, light, and airy crumb structure characteristic of a good sponge cake. This aligns with the fundamental principles of pastry science and ensures the product meets the expected sensory attributes for this specific type of cake. Adherence to these principles is an implicit ethical obligation to deliver quality products. Incorrect approaches analysis. Using bread flour for a sponge cake would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Bread flour has a high protein content, 12–14%, designed to develop strong gluten for chewy bread structures. Incorporating it into a sponge cake would result in a tough, dense, and rubbery texture, failing to meet the fundamental requirements of the product and misleading the consumer about the expected quality. This demonstrates a lack of fundamental culinary knowledge and a failure to uphold professional standards. Choosing all-purpose flour for a sponge cake, while less detrimental than bread flour, still represents a suboptimal professional decision and a potential ethical lapse. All-purpose flour has a moderate protein content, 10–12%. While it can be used for cakes, it will result in a slightly less tender and delicate crumb compared to cake flour. If the standard for the establishment or client expectation is for a supremely light sponge, using all-purpose flour would fall short, indicating a failure to optimize for the best possible outcome and potentially not meeting implicit quality promises. Opting for gluten-free flour blend without specific recipe adaptation for a traditional sponge cake would be a critical failure. Gluten-free flours lack the gluten-forming proteins of wheat flour. While they are essential for individuals with celiac disease or gluten sensitivities, their behavior in baking is fundamentally different. A standard sponge cake recipe relies on gluten for structure and elasticity. Substituting a generic gluten-free blend without understanding its specific properties, e.g., binding agents, starches, would likely result in a cake that is crumbly, lacks structure, and has an undesirable texture, failing to meet the definition of a sponge cake and potentially posing a health risk if cross-contamination is not managed. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such decisions by first identifying the desired end product and its characteristic texture and structure. Then they must assess the available ingredients, specifically their protein content and milling characteristics, and understand how these properties will influence gluten development. The decision-making process involves matching the ingredient properties to the desired outcome, prioritizing the flour type that will best achieve the target texture. This requires continuous learning and application of culinary science principles. When in doubt, consulting established culinary texts or experienced mentors is a sound professional practice. The ultimate goal is to consistently produce high-quality products that meet or exceed expectations, upholding the integrity of the profession. Question 8. Investigation of the most suitable fat for a delicate vanilla sponge cake where optimal crumb structure and a rich, buttery flavor are paramount requires careful consideration of fat properties. Which fat, when used appropriately, best aligns with these desired outcomes? Option A. Vegetable shortening for its neutral flavor and high smoke point. Option B. Lard for its high shortening power that ensures tenderness. Option C. Canola oil for its liquid state and ease of incorporation. Option D. Butter, due to its flavor contribution and creaming properties that aid in aeration. The correct answer is D. Butter, due to its flavor contribution and creaming properties that aid in aeration. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a certified pastry chef, CPC, must select the most appropriate fat for a specific application, considering its functional properties and flavor impact, while adhering to the implicit standards of quality and best practices expected within the profession. The challenge lies in balancing technical knowledge of fat types with the desired outcome of the pastry. Careful judgment is required to ensure the chosen fat contributes positively to texture, flavor, and overall product integrity, aligning with the expectations of discerning consumers and the reputation of the chef. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the functional properties of fats that directly influence pastry texture and flavor, such as shortening power and flavor contribution, while also considering the smoke point for cooking methods. This aligns with the core competencies of a CPC, which include understanding ingredient science to achieve optimal results. By selecting butter for its flavor and creaming ability in a delicate cake, the chef demonstrates an understanding of how fat type impacts the final product's sensory qualities and structural integrity, adhering to the implicit professional standard of using ingredients that enhance, rather than detract from, the pastry's appeal. An incorrect approach that prioritizes only smoke point for a delicate cake would be a regulatory or ethical failure, because it disregards the fundamental role of fats in texture and flavor development. For instance, using a high smoke point oil like canola oil in a cake batter, while technically safe from a burning perspective, would fail to provide the necessary aeration through creaming and the desirable richness and flavor that butter imparts. This would violate the professional expectation of producing a high-quality pastry that meets sensory standards, potentially misleading consumers about the expected taste and texture. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on shortening power without considering flavor, might lead to a technically sound but bland product. This would be a failure to meet the implicit standard of creating a palatable and enjoyable pastry, as flavor is a critical component of professional pastry. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the desired pastry characteristics. First, identify the primary functional requirement. Is it tenderness, flakiness, aeration, or moisture? Second, consider the flavor profile. What taste contribution is desired from the fat? Third, assess the cooking method and its temperature requirements to determine an appropriate smoke point. Finally, weigh the cost and availability of different fats against their functional and flavor contributions to make a holistic, informed decision that upholds professional standards of quality and excellence. Question 9. What factors determine the appropriate selection and application of baking powder, baking soda, and yeast in pastry preparation to achieve optimal leavening and texture? Option A. The popularity of the pastry among consumers and the availability of specialized baking equipment. Option B. The presence and type of acidic ingredients in the recipe, the desired rate of leavening, and the specific fermentation characteristics of the yeast strain. Option C. The overall color of the dough and the ambient humidity in the kitchen. Option D. The cost of the leavening agent and the shelf life of the finished product. The correct answer is B. The presence and type of acidic ingredients in the recipe, the desired rate of leavening, and the specific fermentation characteristics of the yeast strain. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because a certified pastry chef, CPC, must ensure consistent product quality and safety, which are directly impacted by the precise application of leavening agents. Misunderstanding the interaction between different leavening agents and ingredients can lead to product failure, waste, and potential customer dissatisfaction. The CPC's reputation and the establishment's credibility are at stake. Adherence to established culinary principles and understanding the scientific basis of baking are paramount. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it demonstrates a thorough understanding of the chemical reactions involved in leavening. Specifically, recognizing that baking soda requires an acidic ingredient to react and produce carbon dioxide, while baking powder contains both an acid and a base, and yeast relies on fermentation for gas production, allows for precise control over the leavening process. This knowledge ensures that the chosen leavening agent is appropriate for the recipe's other ingredients and desired outcome, leading to predictable and desirable texture, volume, and flavor. This aligns with the CPC's responsibility to produce high-quality, safe, and consistent baked goods. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the quantity of leavening agent without considering its type and the recipe's pH is professionally unacceptable. This would be a regulatory failure, as it deviates from established food science principles that underpin safe and effective food preparation, potentially leading to inconsistent results and compromised product integrity. Another incorrect approach that ignores the role of temperature and time in yeast fermentation would also be a failure. Yeast activity is highly sensitive to environmental conditions. Neglecting these factors can result in underproofed or overproofed products, impacting both quality and potentially safety if fermentation is incomplete or excessive. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of the recipe's requirements, the desired outcome, and the properties of available leavening agents. A CPC should first identify the primary leavening mechanism needed, chemical or biological. Then, they must consider the pH of other ingredients to determine if an acid is present for baking soda activation, or if a complete leavening system like baking powder is necessary. For yeast, understanding the optimal temperature range and proofing time for the specific strain is crucial. This analytical approach, grounded in scientific understanding, ensures the selection and application of leavening agents that will yield the best results while adhering to professional standards of quality and consistency. Question 10. When evaluating the risk associated with incorporating raw eggs into a mousse recipe for a large catering event, which mixing method best aligns with the Certified Pastry Chef (CPC) regulatory framework for ensuring food safety and product integrity? Option A. Directly folding raw egg whites into the chocolate and cream base without any prior cooking or stabilization. Option B. Using pasteurized egg whites as a direct substitute for raw egg whites in the recipe. Option C. Relying on the chilling process of the finished mousse to mitigate any risks associated with raw egg consumption. Option D. Incorporating the raw egg whites into a stable meringue base before folding into the other ingredients, ensuring the meringue is properly cooked to a safe temperature. The correct answer is D. Incorporating the raw egg whites into a stable meringue base before folding into the other ingredients, ensuring the meringue is properly cooked to a safe temperature. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because the Certified Pastry Chef (CPC) must balance the need for efficient production with the critical requirement of maintaining food safety and quality standards, especially when dealing with potentially hazardous ingredients like raw eggs. The regulatory framework for CPCs emphasizes adherence to established food handling protocols to prevent foodborne illnesses and ensure product integrity. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes food safety by minimizing the time raw eggs are at temperatures conducive to bacterial growth. This aligns with general food safety guidelines and the implied standards of a professional pastry chef, which include preventing cross-contamination and ensuring ingredients are handled in a manner that reduces risk. The method chosen directly addresses the potential risks associated with raw egg consumption and aligns with the expectation of a CPC to produce safe and high-quality products. An incorrect approach that involves using raw eggs without immediate chilling or incorporating them into a cooked component fails to meet fundamental food safety regulations. This could lead to a violation of health codes and expose consumers to salmonella or other pathogens, representing a significant ethical and regulatory failure. Another incorrect approach that relies solely on visual cues for doneness without considering the internal temperature or the specific risks of raw egg components would also be a failure, as it bypasses established safety protocols and relies on subjective judgment rather than objective safety measures. Professionals should use a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential hazards, e.g., raw eggs, temperature abuse. They must then consult relevant food safety regulations and best practices for the specific ingredients and techniques being used. The chosen method should demonstrably mitigate identified risks. If there is any doubt about safety, the chef should seek clarification or alternative methods that are demonstrably safer, rather than proceeding with a potentially risky practice. Question 11. The performance metrics show a batch of French macarons exhibiting a cracked shell and a hollow interior, deviating from the desired smooth, crisp exterior and chewy interior. The chef suspects an issue with the egg component of the recipe. Considering the structural and functional properties of eggs, which of the following is the most likely primary cause for this specific macaron defect? Option A. Insufficient aeration of the egg whites, leading to a weak structure that collapses during baking and fails to trap moisture effectively. Option B. The presence of too much fat from the egg yolk, which interferes with the protein network formation necessary for a stable aerated structure. Option C. Overcoagulation of the egg white proteins due to excessive heat during the macronage stage, preventing proper expansion and creating a brittle shell. Option D. Underbeating of the egg whites, resulting in a foam that is not stable enough to support the weight of the batter and leads to weeping during baking. Correct answer is A. Insufficient aeration of the egg whites, leading to a weak structure that collapses during baking and fails to trap moisture effectively. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in professional pastry kitchens, achieving consistent product quality under pressure. The performance metrics indicate a deviation from the expected outcome, specifically in the texture and stability of a meringue-based dessert. This requires the pastry chef to diagnose the root cause, which likely involves understanding the fundamental properties of eggs and how they are affected by various techniques. The challenge lies in identifying the specific egg component and its functional role that has been compromised, and then determining the correct intervention without compromising food safety or product integrity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach focuses on the specific functional properties of egg yolks and whites in the context of aeration and emulsification. Egg whites are primarily responsible for aeration due to their protein structure, which traps air when whipped. Egg yolks, on the other hand, contain lecithin, a powerful emulsifier, and fats that contribute to richness and stability. A meringue's success hinges on the stable aeration of egg whites, and if the texture is compromised, it suggests an issue with the protein denaturation and foam structure. The correct approach correctly identifies that the issue is likely related to the emulsifying properties of the yolk interfering with the aeration of the whites, or a failure in the denaturation of the egg white proteins. This aligns with the fundamental principles of pastry science and the Certified Pastry Chef (CPC) curriculum, which emphasizes understanding ingredient functions for optimal results. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach might suggest adding more sugar immediately to firm up the meringue. While sugar does play a role in stabilizing meringue by interfering with protein coagulation and absorbing moisture, adding it too early or in the wrong proportion can hinder initial aeration by increasing the viscosity of the egg whites. This would be a failure to understand the sequential addition of ingredients and their impact on protein structure and aeration. Another incorrect approach could be to discard the batch and start over without attempting to diagnose the problem. While sometimes necessary, this represents a failure in problem solving and resource management, which are key professional competencies. It also indicates a lack of understanding of how to troubleshoot and potentially salvage a product, a skill expected of a certified professional. A third incorrect approach might involve overwhipping the egg whites to compensate for a perceived lack of volume. Overwhipping can lead to the breakdown of the protein network, resulting in a dry, brittle meringue that can weep. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of the delicate balance required for stable egg white foams and the point at which coagulation becomes detrimental to aeration. Professional reasoning. A professional pastry chef must approach such a situation by first recalling the fundamental science behind the ingredients and techniques. This involves understanding the roles of egg whites in aeration and coagulation, and egg yolks in emulsification and richness. The decision-making process should involve 1. Observing the specific defect, e.g., weeping, poor volume, grainy texture. 2. Recalling the scientific principles governing the ingredients involved, eggs, sugar, acid. 3. Identifying potential points of failure in the process, e.g., temperature, ingredient ratios, mixing technique. 4. Formulating a hypothesis about the cause. 5. Proposing a targeted solution based on scientific understanding, prioritizing food safety and quality. This systematic approach, grounded in the CPC's emphasis on scientific principles, ensures efficient problem-solving and consistent, high-quality results. Question 12. The control framework reveals a request from a discerning client for a series of miniature tart shells made from pâte sablé, intended for an avant-garde dessert presentation. The client has specifically requested that the shells be exceptionally delicate and almost translucent to enhance the visual lightness of the final dessert. The pastry chef is concerned that achieving such extreme thinness may compromise the characteristic buttery, crumbly texture and structural integrity of traditional pâte sablé, potentially leading to breakage during assembly or transport. What is the most appropriate course of action for the pastry chef to ensure both client satisfaction and the integrity of the pâte sablé? Option A. Modify the pâte sablé recipe significantly by adding extra binders and reducing the fat content to achieve the desired thinness and translucency, even if it alters the fundamental characteristics of the dough. Option B. Inform the client that their request is technically impossible and refuse to make the tart shells, suggesting a completely different type of pastry base. Option C. Proceed with making the tart shells as thin as possible according to the client's request, prioritizing the visual outcome above all else, and address any structural issues that arise after the fact. Option D. Consult with the client to explain the technical limitations of achieving extreme thinness with pâte sablé while maintaining its signature texture and structural integrity, and propose alternative methods or slight modifications to achieve a visually delicate appearance that still respects the dough's inherent qualities. Correct answer is D. Consult with the client to explain the technical limitations of achieving extreme thinness with pâte sablé while maintaining its signature texture and structural integrity, and propose alternative methods or slight modifications to achieve a visually delicate appearance that still respects the dough's inherent qualities. Explanation. The control framework reveals a potential deviation in the preparation of pâte sablé for a high-profile client event. The challenge lies in balancing the client's specific aesthetic requirements with the fundamental principles of pâte sablé integrity, ensuring both visual appeal and structural soundness. The client has requested an unusually thin and delicate tart shell for a visually striking presentation. This presents a professional dilemma. Adhering strictly to the client's aesthetic might compromise the dough's characteristic crumbly texture and structural integrity, leading to breakage and a subpar final product. Conversely, prioritizing traditional pâte sablé technique might not meet the client's visual expectations. The correct approach involves a nuanced understanding of pâte sablé science and a collaborative communication strategy. It represents best professional practice by prioritizing the integrity of the pastry while seeking to meet client expectations through informed consultation. This involves explaining the inherent properties of pâte sablé and how extreme thinness can impact its texture and stability. The chef should propose alternative methods or slight adjustments that achieve a visually delicate appearance without sacrificing the dough's essential qualities, such as pre-baking to a specific point or using a slightly different fat ratio that still allows for crumbliness but offers more structural support. This demonstrates technical expertise, client-centric problem-solving, and adherence to professional standards of quality and client satisfaction. An incorrect approach would be to blindly follow the client's request for an extremely thin shell without considering the consequences. This demonstrates a lack of technical judgment and a failure to uphold professional standards of quality. It could lead to a product that is visually appealing initially but fails structurally, resulting in client dissatisfaction and damage to the chef's reputation. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the client's request outright without offering any alternatives or explanations. This shows poor communication skills and a lack of client service orientation, potentially alienating the client and missing an opportunity to innovate within the bounds of professional practice. A third incorrect approach might involve using excessive binding agents or alternative flours to achieve the desired thinness, thereby fundamentally altering the nature of pâte sablé and misrepresenting the product. This would be a failure of authenticity and technical integrity. Professional reasoning in such situations requires a systematic approach. First, thoroughly assess the feasibility of the client's request against established culinary principles and the specific characteristics of the ingredient pâte sablé. Second, identify potential risks and compromises to quality and integrity. Third, engage in transparent and informative communication with the client, explaining the technical considerations and potential outcomes. Fourth, propose well-reasoned alternatives that aim to satisfy both the client's aesthetic desires and the professional standards of the pastry. Finally, document any agreed-upon deviations and their rationale. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a batch of fresh milk, heavy cream, cultured buttermilk, and unsalted butter has just arrived at the pastry kitchen. The chef needs to prepare a delicate mousse requiring the cream to be whipped and a rich shortbread that requires softened butter. The milk and buttermilk are for various other pastry bases and fillings. What is the most appropriate immediate action to ensure food safety and product quality for all these dairy items? Option A. Refrigerate the milk and cream, but leave the butter and buttermilk on the counter to soften and temper for immediate use. Option B. Store the butter at room temperature indefinitely to ensure it is soft enough for creaming, and leave the buttermilk out to temper. Option C. Refrigerate the milk and cream immediately at or below 5 degrees C. Store the butter in a cool, dry place to soften slightly for later use, and refrigerate the buttermilk. Option D. Leave the milk and cream at ambient temperature, while preparing other ingredients to allow them to reach optimal temperature for whipping and creaming. Correct answer is C. Refrigerate the milk and cream immediately at or below 5 degrees C. Store the butter in a cool, dry place to soften slightly for later use, and refrigerate the buttermilk. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in a professional pastry kitchen, managing diverse dairy ingredients with varying shelf lives and storage requirements under time pressure. The challenge lies in ensuring food safety, product quality, and regulatory compliance simultaneously, especially when dealing with perishable items like milk and cream. A pastry chef must exercise meticulous judgment to prevent spoilage, cross-contamination, and potential health hazards, all while maintaining the integrity of their creations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes immediate, proper storage of all dairy products upon receipt. This aligns with fundamental food safety regulations, such as those outlined by the Food Standards Agency, FSA, in the UK, which mandate that perishable foods be stored at appropriate temperatures to inhibit bacterial growth. Refrigerating milk and cream at or below 5 degrees C and butter at a temperature that maintains its firmness but prevents rancidity are critical steps. Buttermilk and yogurt, being cultured products, also require refrigeration to maintain their intended texture and prevent spoilage. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of temperature abuse, which can lead to rapid deterioration and the proliferation of pathogens, thereby safeguarding both consumer health and the quality of the final pastry products. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves leaving the milk and cream at ambient temperature for an extended period while preparing other ingredients. This constitutes a significant food safety failure, as it allows bacteria to multiply rapidly in the danger zone, between 5 degrees C and 63 degrees C. This directly contravenes FSA guidelines on temperature control for perishable foods and could lead to foodborne illness, a serious ethical and legal breach. Another incorrect approach is to store the butter at room temperature indefinitely to soften it for creaming. While softening butter is necessary for certain pastry techniques, leaving it out for prolonged periods without considering its fat content and potential for rancidity or contamination is risky. High-fat butter is less prone to rapid spoilage than lower-fat alternatives, but it can still become rancid or absorb odors from the environment, impacting the flavor of the final product and potentially becoming unsafe if left out for too long. Proper softening techniques involve controlled environments or brief periods at room temperature, followed by immediate refrigeration if not used. A third incorrect approach is to store the opened buttermilk and yogurt on the counter to come to room temperature before use, without considering their cultured nature and susceptibility to spoilage. While some cultured products benefit from being at a slightly cooler room temperature for optimal texture in certain applications, leaving them exposed for extended periods increases the risk of contamination and spoilage, especially if the ambient temperature is high. This disregards the need to maintain the integrity of these products and could lead to off flavors or textures in the finished pastries. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic approach to dairy management. Upon receipt, all dairy products should be inspected for damage and then immediately stored according to their specific requirements. This includes checking expiry dates and ensuring refrigeration temperatures are maintained. When preparing to use ingredients like butter, a chef should employ controlled softening methods. For cultured products like buttermilk and yogurt, understanding their specific storage needs and how they are affected by temperature is crucial. A robust food safety management system, often based on hacked principles, should guide these decisions, ensuring that potential hazards are identified and controlled at every stage of the process. Question 14. Cost-benefit analysis shows that using a pre-made puff pastry dough, while faster, results in a less desirable texture and flavor compared to traditional hand-laminated dough. However, a critical ingredient shortage for the traditional method is imminent. Considering the Certified Pastry Chef, CPC, exam's emphasis on foundational techniques and quality, which of the following approaches best balances operational efficiency with the integrity of classic puff pastry? Option A. Perform a reduced number of folds, e.g., 3 single folds instead of the standard 4, and ensure the butter is well chilled and thinly incorporated to maximize the potential for layering, accepting a slightly less pronounced rise. Option B. Utilize a commercially produced, pre-laminated puff pastry dough to save significant time and labor, focusing on presentation to mask any textural differences. Option C. Substitute the butter with a high-quality margarine that has a similar melting point to butter, aiming to achieve a comparable layering effect. Option D. Increase the hydration of the dough slightly to make it more pliable, allowing for more folds in a shorter time frame, even if it means the butter might soften slightly during the process. The correct answer is A. Perform a reduced number of folds, e.g., 3 single folds instead of the standard 4, and ensure the butter is well chilled and thinly incorporated to maximize the potential for layering, accepting a slightly less pronounced rise. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in professional pastry kitchens, balancing efficiency and quality when faced with time constraints and ingredient limitations. The certified pastry chef, CPC, must make a decision that impacts the final product's texture, flavor, and adherence to classic standards, all while considering operational realities. The challenge lies in understanding the fundamental principles of puff pastry lamination and how deviations affect the outcome, and then applying that knowledge to a practical, albeit compromised, situation. The correct approach prioritizes the integrity of the puff pastry structure and flavor profile, even if it requires a slight adjustment to the traditional method. This represents best professional practice because it upholds the standards expected of a certified pastry chef. By understanding that the goal of lamination is to create distinct layers of dough and butter that steam and expand, this approach ensures that the critical elements for achieving that characteristic flakiness are preserved. It demonstrates a deep understanding of the science behind the pastry and a commitment to delivering a high-quality product that meets customer expectations and the professional reputation of the establishment. Adherence to established techniques, even with minor adaptations, is a hallmark of a skilled professional. An incorrect approach that relies on a significantly reduced number of folds or an insufficient butter incorporation would fail professionally by compromising the essential flaky texture and delicate crispness that define classic puff pastry. This would be a regulatory failure, in the sense of not meeting the implicit standards of quality and authenticity associated with the certified pastry chef designation. Ethically, it could be considered a failure to deliver on the implied promise of a high-quality product to the consumer. Another incorrect approach, such as substituting a different type of fat without understanding its impact on layering and steam generation, would also be a failure. This demonstrates a lack of fundamental knowledge and a disregard for the specific properties of butter in puff pastry, leading to an inferior product and a potential breach of professional standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first identifying the core objective of the technique being employed, e.g., creating distinct layers for puff pastry. Then, assess the available resources and constraints. Next, evaluate potential deviations from the standard method, considering their impact on the desired outcome based on a thorough understanding of the underlying culinary science. Finally, choose the option that best preserves the essential qualities of the final product while acknowledging any necessary compromises, always aiming to uphold professional standards and customer satisfaction. Question 15. Assessment of the critical steps in preparing pâte à foncer for tart molds, including lining and pre-baking, to ensure optimal texture and structural integrity of the final tart. Option A. Chilling the pâte à foncer briefly, then lining the mold and blind baking with weights until fully cooked, without a subsequent bake. Option B. Lining the tart mold with pâte à foncer immediately after mixing, without significant chilling, and proceeding directly to a full bake without blind baking. Option C. Ensuring the pâte à foncer is thoroughly chilled before lining the mold, using parchment paper and pie weights for blind baking until lightly golden, and then removing weights for a final brief bake to achieve a crisp finish. Option D. Lining the tart mold with pâte à foncer after a short chilling period, blind baking with weights until the edges are set, and then removing weights and baking until the center is cooked through. The correct answer is C. Ensuring the pâte à foncer is thoroughly chilled before lining the mold, using parchment paper and pie weights for blind baking until lightly golden, and then removing weights for a final brief bake to achieve a crisp finish. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging due to the critical role of pâte à foncer in achieving a high-quality tart. Improper lining and pre-baking can lead to a soggy bottom, uneven cooking, and a compromised final product, impacting customer satisfaction and the reputation of the establishment. Adherence to established pastry techniques is paramount, as is understanding the underlying scientific principles of baking. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it systematically addresses the key stages of preparing pâte à fiancer for tart molds. This involves ensuring the dough is properly chilled to prevent shrinkage and maintain its structure during baking, using appropriate weights to blind bake effectively and prevent puffing, and achieving the desired level of crispness without overbaking. This meticulous attention to detail aligns with the professional standards expected of a certified pastry chef, CPC, emphasizing precision and consistency in execution. While the CPC exam does not specify a particular jurisdiction's food safety regulations, the principles of proper food handling and preparation are universally understood and implicitly required for professional certification. An incorrect approach that involves rushing the chilling process of the pâte à fiancer before lining the mold is professionally unacceptable. This haste can result in the dough being too soft and difficult to handle, leading to tears or an uneven thickness, which directly impacts the final texture and appearance of the tart. Ethically, it represents a failure to uphold the standards of quality and craftsmanship expected of a certified professional. Another incorrect approach, such as skipping the blind baking step entirely or not using sufficient weights, would lead to a raw or undercooked tart base. This is a direct failure in executing a fundamental technique for tart preparation. Professionally, it demonstrates a lack of understanding of how heat affects pastry and a disregard for achieving the desired crisp texture. This can lead to customer complaints and damage the establishment's reputation. A further incorrect approach, like overbaking the pâte à fiancer to compensate for insufficient chilling or improper blind baking, would result in a burnt or excessively hard crust. This is also a failure in technique and judgment, leading to a product that is unpalatable. It signifies a lack of control over the baking process and a failure to achieve the intended balance of textures. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves a thorough understanding of the recipe and techniques, a commitment to precision at each step, and the ability to troubleshoot and adapt based on the dough's behavior and the baking environment. It requires a proactive approach, anticipating potential issues and implementing preventative measures, rather than reacting to problems after they arise. This methodical approach ensures consistent, high-quality results, which is the hallmark of a skilled and certified pastry chef. Question 16. Process analysis reveals that a busy bakery is preparing a variety of baked goods, including delicate pastries, dense cakes, and large loaves of bread. To ensure food safety and maintain product quality, what is the most appropriate cooling strategy for these diverse items? Option A. Utilize rapid cooling methods such as blast chillers or ice baths for all items, ensuring the core temperature reaches 40 degrees F, 5 degrees C, or below within a specified time frame, while considering the specific needs of each product type. Option B. Submerge hot baked goods directly into a large container of ice water to accelerate cooling. Option C. Allow all baked goods to cool completely on racks at ambient room temperature for several hours before packaging or further processing. Option D. Focus on cooling only the exterior of larger baked items to prevent condensation, leaving the interior to cool naturally over a longer period. Correct answer is A. Utilize rapid cooling methods such as blast chillers or ice baths for all items, ensuring the core temperature reaches 40 degrees F, 5 degrees C, or below within a specified time frame, while considering the specific needs of each product type. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because improper cooling of baked goods can lead to significant food safety risks, impacting both consumer health and the reputation of the establishment. The certified pastry chef, CPC, must demonstrate a thorough understanding of cooling principles to prevent microbial growth, which is a core competency. Careful judgment is required to select the most appropriate cooling method based on the specific characteristics of the baked good, ensuring both safety and quality. The correct approach emphasizes rapid cooling to move baked goods through the danger zone, between 40 degrees F and 140 degrees F or 5 degrees C and 60 degrees C, where bacteria multiply most quickly. This aligns with fundamental food safety regulations and guidelines, such as those promoted by the Food Standards Agency, FSA, in the UK, which mandate that food must be cooled as quickly as is safely possible. Rapid cooling prevents the proliferation of harmful microorganisms, thereby safeguarding public health and adhering to ethical obligations to serve safe food. This method also helps maintain the desired texture and quality of the baked goods by minimizing moisture loss and preventing staling. An incorrect approach that involves leaving baked goods to cool at ambient room temperature for extended periods is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This practice directly contravenes food safety legislation that requires food to be cooled rapidly to prevent bacterial growth. Ethically, it demonstrates a disregard for consumer well-being and a lack of professional diligence. Another incorrect approach, such as submerging hot baked goods directly into ice water without proper containment or consideration for cross-contamination, poses a risk of diluting flavor profiles and potentially introducing contaminants, which is also a failure in maintaining food quality and safety standards. Finally, cooling only the exterior of a large baked item while the interior remains warm allows for prolonged time in the danger zone, creating a breeding ground for bacteria and representing a critical lapse in food safety protocols. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes food safety above all else. This involves understanding the thermal properties of different baked goods, the capacity of available cooling equipment, and the specific regulatory requirements for cooling times and temperatures. A systematic approach would involve assessing the size and density of the baked item, selecting a cooling method that ensures the core temperature drops rapidly, and monitoring the cooling process to confirm it meets safety standards. This proactive and informed decision-making process is essential for maintaining professional integrity and ensuring the highest standards of food safety and quality. Question 17. The monitoring system demonstrates that the puff pastry dough for vol au vents, palmiers, and turnovers has been laminated and folded, but the dough has not been adequately chilled between each folding stage due to time constraints for an upcoming event. The chef is considering proceeding directly to shaping and baking to meet the deadline. Option A. Halt production of the puff pastry items, re-chill the dough thoroughly between folds, and adjust the event timeline or production schedule accordingly. Option B. Proceed with shaping and baking, but increase the oven temperature to compensate for the lack of chilling. Option C. Delegate the shaping and baking to less experienced staff to free up time for re-chilling the dough. Option D. Proceed with shaping and baking immediately, prioritizing the event deadline over the chilling requirement. The correct answer is D. Proceed with shaping and baking immediately, prioritizing the event deadline over the chilling requirement. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a pastry chef to balance the aesthetic appeal and structural integrity of puff pastry applications with the practicalities of production and potential for spoilage. Ensuring consistency across multiple batches of vol au vents, palmiers, and turnovers, especially when preparing for a large event, demands meticulous attention to detail at every stage, from dough preparation to final presentation. The risk of underbaking, overbaking, or improper handling can lead to products that are either unappetizing or unsafe for consumption. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes food safety and quality control throughout the entire production process. Adhering to strict temperature controls for dough chilling and baking, ensuring proper lamination techniques are consistently applied, and implementing a thorough quality check before serving are all critical for producing safe, delicious, and visually appealing puff pastry items. This systematic approach minimizes the risk of contamination, ensures proper texture and flakiness, and aligns with the implicit ethical responsibility of a certified pastry chef to deliver high-quality, safe food products to consumers. An incorrect approach that involves skipping the chilling stage between folds would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This omission directly compromises the lamination process, leading to a greasy, dense pastry rather than a light, flaky one. It also increases the risk of bacterial growth due to the dough being at warmer temperatures for longer periods, potentially violating food safety regulations. Another incorrect approach, such as serving palmiers that show signs of uneven baking, e.g., some burnt edges, others pale, represents a failure in quality control and an ethical lapse in presenting substandard products. This not only disappoints customers, but also reflects poorly on the chef's professional standards and the integrity of the certification. Furthermore, using a pre-made, lower-quality puff pastry for vol au vents without disclosure if the expectation is from-scratch preparation, is an ethical breach of transparency and misrepresentation of the product's origin. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a comprehensive risk assessment at each production step. This includes evaluating potential food safety hazards, quality control points, and resource management. A chef should always prioritize established food safety protocols and best practices for pastry production. When faced with time constraints or production challenges, the decision should always lean towards maintaining quality and safety, even if it means adjusting the scope of the offering or communicating potential delays. The certified pastry chef designation implies a commitment to excellence, which necessitates a proactive and diligent approach to all aspects of pastry creation. Question 18. Market research demonstrates a growing consumer interest in visually striking and uniquely flavored classic chew paste creations, such as cream puffs, eclairs, and profiteroles. A certified pastry chef, CPC, is tasked with developing new offerings that appeal to this trend while maintaining the integrity and quality expected of these traditional pastries. Which approach best reflects professional best practice for a CPC in this situation? Option A. Immediately adopt visually appealing but untested flavor combinations and decorative techniques found on popular social media platforms, assuming consumer acceptance will outweigh any potential textural or stability issues. Option B. Rely on anecdotal advice from colleagues and readily available online recipes for innovative chew paste variations, without conducting independent testing or verifying ingredient sourcing and potential allergen implications. Option C. Focus solely on creating elaborate visual presentations for existing, standard chew paste recipes, without exploring any modifications to the paste itself or its fillings, to avoid any risk of compromising the traditional product. Option D. Prioritize extensive recipe testing and validation of ingredient substitutions or flavor additions to ensure structural integrity, taste, and safety, while documenting all changes and their impact on the classic chew paste foundation. The correct answer is D. Prioritize extensive recipe testing and validation of ingredient substitutions or flavor additions to ensure structural integrity, taste, and safety, while documenting all changes and their impact on the classic chew paste foundation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing established culinary tradition with evolving consumer preferences and potential regulatory considerations, even within the context of a pastry exam. The Certified Pastry Chef, CPC designation implies adherence to recognized standards of quality, safety, and potentially ingredient sourcing or labeling, depending on the specific jurisdiction's food regulations. A chef must demonstrate not only technical skill, but also an understanding of how their creations fit within a broader market and regulatory landscape. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the core chew paste recipe and its traditional applications, while also acknowledging the need for informed adaptation. This involves meticulous recipe testing, understanding the impact of ingredient substitutions on texture and stability, and ensuring any modifications align with food safety standards. For classic cream puffs, eclairs, and profiteroles, the integrity of the chew shell is paramount, and any deviation must be carefully controlled and validated. This approach demonstrates a commitment to quality and a responsible method for innovation. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on aesthetic appeal without considering the structural integrity of the chew paste is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to products that collapse, have an undesirable texture, or fail to meet customer expectations, thereby damaging the reputation of the establishment. Furthermore, if ingredient substitutions are made without proper testing or consideration for allergens, it could lead to regulatory noncompliance and health risks for consumers, a critical failure in food service. Another incorrect approach that relies on unverified online recipes or anecdotal advice without rigorous testing is also professionally unsound. This bypasses the essential steps of quality control and risk assessment. It can result in inconsistent product quality, potential food safety hazards, and a lack of understanding of the underlying science of pastry, which is crucial for a certified professional. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for the principles of professional pastry making. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. 1. Understand the core principles and traditional methods of the dish. 2. Identify the desired innovation or adaptation. 3. Conduct thorough research on potential ingredient substitutions and their impact. 4. Perform rigorous testing and documentation of results, focusing on texture, flavor, and stability. 5. Consider all relevant food safety regulations and allergen information. 6. Evaluate the market appeal and feasibility of the modified product. 7. Document the final, validated recipe and process. Question 19. Cost-benefit analysis shows that using a mealy dough and skipping blind baking for classic apple pie can reduce preparation time and ingredient waste, but a certified pastry chef, CPC, must consider the potential impact on the final product's quality and customer satisfaction. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the professional standards and expectations for a CPC when preparing a classic apple pie? Option A. Opting for a mealy dough for all pies to maximize efficiency and using a thicker filling to compensate for potential sogginess. Option B. Skipping blind baking entirely and focusing on a very thick, dry filling to prevent a soggy bottom crust. Option C. Employing a flaky dough technique, blind baking if the filling is particularly wet, and executing precise crimping to ensure structural integrity and a crisp bottom crust. Option D. Using a flaky dough but omitting blind baking and relying solely on a high oven temperature to cook the bottom crust quickly. Correct answer is C. Employing a flaky dough technique, blind baking if the filling is particularly wet, and executing precise crimping to ensure structural integrity and a crisp bottom crust. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the certified pastry chef, CPC, must balance the desire for a visually appealing and texturally superior classic apple pie with the practical constraints of production time and ingredient cost. The risk lies in compromising either the quality of the final product or the profitability of the operation. Careful judgment is required to select the dough preparation and baking method that best meets these competing demands without violating any implicit or explicit standards of professional pastry practice, which in the context of the CPC certification emphasizes adherence to established techniques and quality benchmarks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes the fundamental characteristics of a classic apple pie, a flaky crust and a fully cooked filling. Blind baking, when necessary, ensures the bottom crust is cooked through and prevents sogginess, a common pitfall. Using a mealy dough, while faster to prepare, can result in a less desirable texture for a fruit pie where flakiness is often preferred. Proper crimping techniques are essential for both structural integrity and aesthetic appeal, preventing filling leakage and contributing to the overall presentation. Adhering to these established techniques aligns with the professional standards expected of a CPC, ensuring a consistent and high-quality product that meets customer expectations and upholds the reputation of the establishment. An incorrect approach that prioritizes speed by skipping blind baking for a wet filling would be professionally unacceptable. This failure to properly prepare the crust would lead to a soggy bottom, a significant defect in a classic pie, and could be seen as a breach of professional duty to deliver a product of acceptable quality. Another incorrect approach, opting for a mealy dough for all pies regardless of filling type, might be cost-effective in terms of labor, but sacrifices the textural integrity expected of a flaky pie crust, potentially disappointing customers and undermining the establishment's reputation for quality. A third incorrect approach, neglecting proper crimping for the sake of speed, could result in filling leakage during baking, creating a mess and compromising the pie's presentation and structural soundness, again failing to meet professional standards. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the specific requirements of the pie being made, filling type, desired texture. This is followed by an assessment of available resources, time, equipment, staff skill. The chef then evaluates potential techniques against these requirements and resources, considering the trade-offs between quality, cost, and time. The CPC certification implies a commitment to mastering and applying these techniques to achieve optimal results, rather than simply finding the quickest or cheapest method. Question 20. Cost-benefit analysis shows that discarding a batch of high-quality couverture chocolate that has accidentally come into contact with cleaning solution would result in a significant financial loss for the day's production. However, the cleaning solution is known to be food-grade, though its direct contact with edible ingredients is not a standard-approved practice. The pastry chef must decide how to proceed while adhering to the certified pastry chef, CPC regulatory framework. Option A. Discard the chocolate and thoroughly clean and sanitize the affected equipment and work surfaces, then proceed with a fresh batch of chocolate. Option B. Attempt to rinse the chocolate thoroughly under running water to remove any residual cleaning solution before proceeding with production. Option C. Use the chocolate, but document the incident and the cleaning solution used, assuming the food-grade nature mitigates the risk. Option D. Proceed with using the chocolate without any special precautions, as the financial loss of discarding it outweighs the perceived minimal risk. The correct answer is A. Discard the chocolate and thoroughly clean and sanitize the affected equipment and work surfaces, then proceed with a fresh batch of chocolate. Explanation. This scenario presents a common ethical dilemma in a professional kitchen, balancing immediate cost savings against long-term food safety and regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in the temptation to cut corners when faced with perceived financial pressures, potentially compromising the integrity of the food being produced and the health of consumers. Careful judgment is required to prioritize safety and adherence to established protocols over short-term economic gains. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses a critical food safety risk identified through a hack principle, preventing cross-contamination, and aligns with fundamental personal hygiene guidelines. By immediately discarding the potentially contaminated ingredients and implementing a thorough cleaning and sanitization protocol, the pastry chef is upholding their responsibility to produce safe food. This action is mandated by food safety regulations, which require proactive measures to prevent hazards, and ethically, it demonstrates a commitment to consumer well-being. The cost of discarded ingredients is a necessary expense to avoid the far greater costs associated with a foodborne illness outbreak, including reputational damage, legal liabilities, and potential business closure. An incorrect approach that prioritizes cost savings by attempting to salvage the contaminated ingredients would be a significant regulatory failure. Food safety laws strictly prohibit the use of ingredients that have been exposed to potential contaminants, as this creates a direct hazard. Ethically, this would be a gross dereliction of duty, knowingly endangering consumers. Another incorrect approach, such as simply rinsing the contaminated ingredients, fails to address the invisible nature of microbial contamination and the potential for chemical residues, thus not meeting the standards for safe food handling and preparation. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of hack principles and proper sanitation. A third incorrect approach, which involves ignoring the incident and proceeding with production, represents a complete disregard for food safety protocols and regulatory requirements, creating an unacceptable risk of widespread contamination and illness. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential hazards, assessing their severity, and then implementing control measures. In this case, the hazard is clear. The decision-making process should then involve consulting the establishment's hack plan and food safety policies. If a situation arises that is not explicitly covered, the guiding principle should always be, when in doubt, throw it out, coupled with immediate corrective actions to prevent recurrence. This proactive and safety-first mindset is crucial for maintaining professional integrity and ensuring public health.